the EMS, if we have someone that might be a part-time EMS tech for us, but they work full-time for City Fire. And if they respond to that fire, they may potentially be exposed to someone that may have COVID. So do we want them coming back into our workforce with that exposure? So we had to develop, if they have a secondary employment that is not considered a high risk. We did have several individuals that work part-time on the weekends for a nursing home. So again, nursing homes in the very early stages of COVID was an area where people were being very exposed. So you just have to take those precautions and put in place some of those guidelines for your employees. Travel restrictions. We've all heard about that. That was something that we did have to follow and put in place again right away. And again, with the advice of the local health officer, it was determined for us anyway that we would not allow any out of state or very limited in-state travel while we were really into the restrictions of that plan. So those are things that we had to put in place policy-wise. Reopening of the offices, we had to establish each building. We do have several locations. That building and those supervisors and department heads needed to get together to see how we needed to do the flow of the public once we did reopen those offices outwardly to the public. So for our building, for example, we do the treasurer's office and the clerk's office, the appraiser's office. So those are some very highly visited areas from the public. So we did have to put up shields to protect the public from the staff and vice versa. Recommendation of wearing masks when possible, marking the lobby with 6 feet distancing, and then also placing staff out in each lobby of each building to address where the public needed to go. Because not only do we have treasurer and clerk's offices that may be able to maintain up to 5 or 6 people needing services, but we had other departments that could only maintain maybe 1. So we would have to communicate with all of those departments to ensure that we weren't sending up or sending public into those areas where social distancing could not be maintained. So it really took a collaborative effort through the guidelines that were in place to make sure that we were assisting the public as we could be, but yet still keeping everyone safe. So again, we didn't want to jeopardize our staff members by just opening up and then everybody's running amok. So we definitely did not want to have that happen. Zoom meetings, as we know, by example today, that has been a very common thread of communication through our establishment. We have had to realign our conference rooms to where we would only have the 6 feet distancing, putting chairs assigned in certain areas. So all of that I'm sure you have witnessed as well. We have done remote virtual interviews. One that I was involved in specifically, that typically we like the face-to-face, we like the one-on-one. Phone interview necessarily was not an option that we wanted to partake in. So we did establish a Zoom interview for one of our higher level positions. Again, so we can get that face-to-face interaction that we are used to having. Let's see, I have a lot of things, I could probably talk all day long, but with this COVID, I know that there are many areas that everybody is dealing with, and I guess some of my just kind of notes that I've taken is, we have to acknowledge as HR professionals and business leaders the high risk and the concern of our employees. A lot of them are scared because they don't know what may coming next. We all don't know if we're sitting next to someone that may be a carrier. That's very much a reality. But you have to put those concerns really into perspective and try to be flexible with your employees, which we have very much tried to do that within each department. We allowed them to establish what kind of work schedule they wanted to do, if it was reduced or alternative work schedules. And with that, we had to make sure our leave policies were in place to accommodate those altering schedules and make sure we apply that to the federal FFCRA Act, which again, understanding that in itself was definitely a challenge. And I will do a shout out to Whitney, who's also on this meeting today. She and I have been back and forth, how do you interpret this situation? We probably have as many situations as we have had employees. And now they just keep seeming to ramp back up again, just when we think we have everything figured out. So being flexible, being understanding with your staff, and making sure that they know that you have their best interest at hand. Because there's a lot of what ifs out there. One last thing that I'll finish up with, because I know my 15 minutes is about up. Make sure your employees are communicating very openly with your supervisors. Even though policies may change and policies may come down from HR or your top CEOs, commissioners, it doesn't mean that it's an automatic, well, if HR says it or the CEO says it, then, it must be okay. I'll just go ahead and take a day off. We have found that some employees may think that it's just an automatic or a guarantee that they may be approved for their leave time. That needs to be communicated still with your chain of command. If you have a supervisor, mid-manager that typically does approve that leave time or whatever, that doesn't change. And so just keeping that open communication and making sure everyone is in the know of, what your policies are, and that they need to practice everything that was established prior to still stands, that your supervisors need to be involved. So I have other things, but I will go ahead and turn it over to Stan for his segment on how he saw some changes within the construction world that might be a little bit on a smaller scale.
Thanks, Cindy. I appreciate the opportunity to visit with you folks here this afternoon. Like Cindy mentioned, I'm Stan Hambright. I'm with the Buyer Construction Company here in Manhattan, and we have approximately 150 employees in about 3 or 4 different counties at different job sites. And I think through all this, a couple of key words have been flexibility or being flexible. I hear that a lot, and we continue to practice that way. When all this first started in early March, there was very little guidance on how to operate through a pandemic. I'd read articles on it before, and even back in the I think it was the late 90s, the Red Cross here in Manhattan had a few classes on operations through a pandemic, but there was very little official guidance on how to operate. And being a construction company, through Governor Kelly's executive order, we were deemed an essential employer, so we continued to work. But having very little guidance, and we were literally making procedure and policy changes on the fly, because a lot of this wasn't addressed in our safety manual or our employee handbook. So consequently, my saved emails on policies and procedures have become amendments, if you will, to the safety manual and our employee handbook. Again, when this first started, the mask, all PPE, including mask and cleaning supplies and hand sanitizer was in such short supply that we had to be creative in how we were able to procure those. We weren't able to get masks, and we had several spouses volunteer to make masks themselves. So I think the last count, they had made over 250 masks that we're able to hand out to our employees. Of course, some of our employees choose to get their own mask or use bandanas as a face covering. I think we all say mask, but there's lots of different face coverings that work in place of a mask. We even had some, since a lot of those materials weren't available locally, and you couldn't order it, or if you did order it, it was on back order. We found that Sam's Club in Salina was pretty well stocked and had a supply of most things. So we got some supplies from there a time or two. And our current hand sanitizer, I don't know if anyone else is using this. I forget what brand it is, but our current hand sanitizer smells like tequila. So I don't know what that's all about, but it's kind of interesting. And I'm talking about these things from an HR and a safety perspective. Some of the things we did to keep everyone safe is we limited the traffic coming and going in and out of our office. Like I said before, most of our employees are scattered around on different job sites, but they come in for administrative issues from time to time. So we just made sure that before they came in the office, they called to make sure it was really required that they come into the office, or if it was something we could handle via email or over the phone, or what have you. We also did the same with vendors. We had signs on our doors that requested that vendors call first, or even once they got here, before coming in, to call and with their contact inside the office to see if this was a delivery that could be left outside, then we could retrieve it ourselves. So that's been a pretty big change because we do have a lot of vendors delivering parts and pipe, water line, and sewer line supplies and so forth. So that was kind of a big deal. But now it's almost like second nature now that we're all trained on how to do that. Another thing, or from an HR perspective, going into the early spring / summertime is our time that we hire the most employees. We're coming out of winter, we're ramping up for summertime. So when this hit, this was quite a challenge because we needed several people. So we offered Zoom interviews. We did include phone interviews in that, and we did continue to do person-to-person, in-person interviews, with, of course, no handshaking, social distancing. Masks were required. We handed out masks as they come in at the front counter and signed in. So we've been able to make that work and still continue our somewhat normal hiring practices. But something that did affect us was how we do orientation, our company and safety orientations, because we have a training room, but it wasn't in sufficient enough size to do more than 2 max at the time for our orientation. So consequently, we've been doing orientation and safety training almost every day, just as we continue to get ramped up for summertime. Some of our training has been moved online, which I guess that's an outcome that is a positive, because I think we'll continue that training online, and we may even do more training online because that's worked out pretty well. Some of the challenges that were in the field on job sites that we did was limit vehicles, limit 2 people per vehicle, which is something that I didn't really think about right away. But you know, we're asking everyone to social distance and wash their hands and wear all their PPE and proper sanitation. Then all of a sudden 6 people pile into a vehicle, into a pickup, and drive across the job site. So one of the things we did there to mitigate that hazard was we started using golf carts on job sites that allowed people to get around back and forth across the job without coveying up, so to speak, in a pickup. I guess those are the high points, I guess, that I wanted to communicate. As I said before, there was very little guidance on how to operate, but since then there's tons of guidance on how to operate. If you are part of a professional association or organization, like the top-notch information you're getting from Herman today, but if you're part of another state association, for instance, Byers is a member of the KCA, Kansas Contractors Association. They have been helpful in providing lots of information. I was also cruising yesterday through the OSHA website, and they have a COVID-19 page that offers tons of information on how to operate safely in the pandemic and as things open up. And the CDC has a guidance for business page. So if anybody has questions, I think there's lots of information now how to open up safely and how to conduct operations. But I'll be available for questions, but I think that's all I have. I'll turn it over to Liz.
Great, thank you, Stan. Okay, so I have a couple notes, and just kind of to expand on what my colleagues said here. So as mentioned, I'm Elizabeth Ward. I'm new to Manhattan, so I'm excited to meet most of you virtually. I work for both Carthage System and Soluciones Recruiting, Translating, and Training. Carthage System is the #6 pork producer in the nation, and their headquarters is in Carthage, Illinois. But we have sites really spanning from Indiana to Nebraska, so representing 6 different states. And then Soluciones RTT is provides training and recruiting solutions across the United States and internationally, with a specific focus on seasonal and long-term ag workers. So really both of those companies across the board are going to be focused on agriculture, which you guys all know are part of the essential workforce. So that brought us some challenges and some opportunities as well. So before I get into that, I just want to say that what my goal is to share with you the 3 big takeaways that really made a lasting impact on our operations, which would be transparent communication, employee appreciation, and reflection. I'll bring you back to those points at the end, but I want to give you some reference of how we implemented some things and how those made an impact as we go along. So since I mentioned we are part of the essential workforce, we had to continue working throughout, and we had to keep our operations, really, the pace of the operations didn't slow at all. Internally, though, we have two separate groups of employees. So we have our production employees who are on 31 different sites across those 6 states that I mentioned. And then we also have our corporate employees. They required very different approaches during the COVID-19 or really any pandemic or any crisis response. So our production-based employees needed to stay on site and physically come to work at the work site every day. They needed to be there during their regular schedules, obvious reasons, and care of animals can't be done remotely, right? So they need us there. The health and safety of our employees was obviously our #1 priority. So we had to figure out how to meet those expectations of caring for the live animals and at the same time, keeping our employees safe and that they have a sense that the company is responsible and cares about their well-being, which we found to be very important. Not only actually doing the things that were required to take care of their safety, but also making sure that they understood or had that sense of safety and security in the company as well. The production employees, though, couldn't continue their work without the support of the corporate staff. So we have logistics, human resources, supply, veterinarian teams, etc. Therefore, we needed to make sure our corporate teams were also able to perform their basic duties and continue to move our company forward as well, even in the midst of so much uncertainty. So some of you might relate to our corporate situation. Our layout pre-pandemic was that we were literally searching for space to put employees in. We're bursting at the seams. And so that means that we have 2 or 3 people in each office space, and that we've converted every open space into a workspace. So obviously that meant that we couldn't actually respect the requirements of social distancing while maintaining our layout in the corporate office. So what we devised was a plan to ensure our employees felt secure, they felt appreciated coming to work every single day, and at the same time felt that they had the confidence really that they could call out if they felt ill or if they had any symptoms of the virus without losing any financial incentive. So, obviously our main goal was to get them to work every day. However, if they did feel ill or they felt like they may have been exposed to the virus, we wanted them to be able to confidently call out and know that they wouldn't necessarily lose a paycheck as long as they were following our processes. So what the plan was, essence, or the skeleton of the plan, is that the corporate offices, we closed our lobbies, similar to what Stan and Cindy both mentioned. We closed our lobbies. We limited 1 person per office space, and then we also required non-essential meetings or any kind of a discussion to be held via video or telephone. And then Cindy reminded me we also did limit our travel to essential only. So we didn't stop all travel, but almost entirely the only travel that was allowed was direct production support. So our veterinarians still traveled and our regional production managers still traveled lesser and took pretty serious precautions. We already have a very strict biosecurity protocol with downtime incorporated, so they followed that as very explicitly. And then we also implemented a quarantine time, which is our biosecurity downtime, but for specific types of travel. So whether or not someone traveled by plane, personal vehicle, train, etc., there was different times of downtimes, and also whether they were traveling internationally or domestically, because we still did have some incoming international employees throughout this time. So 2/3 of our corporate employees began working from home. IT department had to get very creative, as we don't have laptops for every single employee. The majority of our employees are using desktops, as probably many of yours are. Some contingent had laptops, but they didn't all. And therefore, they're not all designed to access the server remotely. We access the server remotely through VPN that Cindy mentioned. That's what we use, but we had to find some workarounds for that. We also, and Stan, you reminded me of this, but we also then, for all of our employees who worked in the office or had a need to come to the office, we provided masks for them. So if they were working in the office, we provided 5 masks for them. We asked them to label them Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and rotate them around so that there would be a 7-day window. Not share them together, not store them together, but wear your Monday mask on Monday and put that out for that 7-day window, and so on. Which I actually haven't heard of other companies doing, but it was a really unique idea that that I think our office manager had. So as a side note, I would like to mention to you guys that we have approximately about 750 employees in our company. But prior to the pandemic, I was the only remote employee in the company. And so I actually have been working remotely for about 5 years. I worked for a year in the corporate office and then started moving around the country and working remotely. So I had some of that experience, and the company had some of that experience just through the one person, but it was a very different environment when 150 of my colleagues joined me remotely. So, and it was kind of fun for them to see the other side, right? That was fun for me as well. So for our production teams then, prior to the requirement for paid leave for anyone affected by the virus or the financial incentives that came out as a requirement for hazard pay, we implemented a very strong leave policy. We supported that with an attendance bonus that we paid out weekly for anyone who either came to work on every scheduled day or called out using the appropriate process. So even if I called out sick one day, if I used the appropriate process and, talked to the manager and did the things I was supposed to do, I was still eligible for that attendance bonus that week. All right. So the only people who didn't get it were people who were no call, no show. All right. And then we also have a very large international workforce that we needed to consider. So with like most ag companies, you are probably at least mildly aware that there are a large number of international employees working at our company and most ag companies. So in the Carthage system alone, there are just under 200 foreign nationals working on our sites, mostly from Mexico, but also representing Central and South America, Africa, the Philippines, and Puerto Rico, which I know is not international, however, has very similar requirements when it comes to managing the travel and the cultural differences with those employees moving to the Midwest. So, and at the same time, Soluciones RTT, which I mentioned earlier, works one of the entire half of our focus is to match seasonal ag workers to temporary positions. And so we have temporary positions in Hawaii and California and really across the nation, anywhere you would have seasonal ag workers. It was very important to stay current with ever-changing rules almost daily changing rules, and not only daily changing rules, but tweets and leaks and erratic press releases. So because people hear these things and they need to have some interpretation. So we stayed very current with those rules, the processes, the travel restrictions for each individual country in and out of the United States, as well as then constantly communicating with our international employees so that they have that sense of security and knowledge in, is this tweet something that's going to affect me and my family, or where is the actual interpretation? What do I need to know, and what are my options? The result, and at the end, I guess, I don't know, hopefully I say the end, I knock on wood, but coming out of the pandemic, at least what we're trying to do is none of our 31 production sites had any COVID-19 cases. And of course, we're blessed because we're insulated by the Midwest. We're not necessarily on the East or West Coast, but that's still a huge blessing. And we maintained a 96% retention rate on our farm and had 0 resignations at our corporate level. So those are, everyone's goals, right? That's the retention when you have entry-level workforce is amazing. And everyone, to add insult to injury, you don't need major resignations in the middle of a pandemic. So now what we're looking at is the phased-in return to work and normal activities. Our challenge is to phase out that attendance bonus, right? So as it becomes less hazardous to go to work every single day, we need to be able to phase that out. While at the same time bringing back our corporate employees into the office, which just started this week. We started bringing back corporate employees this week, and maintaining everyone's sense of safety and security while working for us. So these are the things we're working to achieve, that sense of safety and appreciation. So the 3 things that I mentioned previously that I want to take home, I just want to elaborate on that. So the transparent and frequent communication. People want to hear a leader's voice. And this holds true both for employees and your clients. They may not even hear everything the leader is saying, but they are comforted by the fact that they're being communicated with and kept up to date. Transparency is very calming. So I would highly recommend you consider, if you haven't been regularly putting out communications, to be doing that to your employees and your clients, if that's appropriate. In Carthage System, we put out several messages from our president, our director of production, our director of human resources, et cetera. And some of those outlined the processes and expectations. Some of them were very SOP oriented, right? This is what we'll be doing. These are the expectations. But some were simply open communication. Just simply, we appreciate you. We know you're coming to work. You're the heart of our company. You know, and that coming from leadership, it had a very strong message. All of these messages were well received and really made an impact. And even if, you know, it was email or a video or whatever, perhaps, you know, people didn't get to the third paragraph of the email, but they still had that regular communication. And then at Soluciones, we worked really hard to keep both clients and workers informed and in contact with our team. We found this previously, but particularly with international processes, there seems to be this veil of misunderstanding and apprehension, both on the worker side and the employee side, because there just seems to be so many political and legal parameters that are very confusing to people. So we found it vital to keep everyone informed. Overall, just communicating that we were keeping up with daily changes was comforting to both. Just assuring both our clients and our employees that we were constantly talking with multiple, I think I have 5 different legal firms that we have communication from on a weekly, if not daily basis. So that was comforting. The second thing is appreciation. So when working with your employees, it never, quote unquote, goes without saying, okay? Some people say it goes without saying that your safety is our best interest, or it goes without saying that we appreciate you. But with your employees, it never goes without saying. Always, always, always tell your team how much you appreciate them, their hard work, and that you care about their safety and well-being. We want to show appreciation in material ways and in verbally. I mean, sometimes just putting, you know, from the COO or from your president saying, I appreciate everything you do. I appreciate you coming to work. I appreciate, you know, your work through the pandemic is great. We would also recommend showing appreciation in material ways if possible. So hazard pay or incentives if possible. Or you can think about a financial bonus for staying with the company through the crisis. It does not need to be a massive amount of money. One thing that we've done in the past for non-crisis kind of recognition is just giving a crisp, brand new crisp $100 bill to every employee with a letter from the COO. I mean, it's not, as far as your company expenses go, it's not it's not huge expense, but it's kind of neat and fun, and to have that crisp $100 bill and then have, you know, the COO tell you that, you know, you're a part of the team and we appreciate you. There's some tax requirements if you're going to do that, but you guys can work that out. And then welcome back. How about simple things like welcome back lunches? Even now with our social distancing requirement, you can have a catered lunch, you can have people eat in small groups, you can have people eat in their own space. One of the things, not only does that show appreciation, but it shows some return to normalcy. You know, people used to have lunch together, or you used to have company picnics or holiday celebrations. So these are things that you can put into play for some return to normalcy. And then the third point is reflection. So, I think this is, for you business leaders, the people who are leading these businesses, I think this is absolutely important. Truly evaluate your wins and losses during the crisis. Think about, are there processes you learned in this crisis that you can implement and make your company more resilient moving forward? You know, Stan mentioned that they took some of their summer training online and that they might end up keeping that, ended up being a positive thing. Is there things like that, you know, do you need to go back to exactly, quote unquote, pre-pandemic normal, or have you spent enough time, energy, and pain figuring out how to run a little bit more efficiently or a little bit differently that may help you in the future? Particularly regarding your staff. So likely this is your number one expenditure in your company. So think about things, think about your staff. They've been either working remotely or working with different shifts, or, you know, different type of work site. Their work site looked differently for several months. So they've gotten used to that. They've got a taste of that. Is there some aspect of that they really enjoyed? Is there some aspect you should continue to implement for flexible options? I know several of my colleagues hated working remotely, but a couple of them felt like, wow, if I could just have a day of remote work, I could really get more done. And so, you know, is that realistic? A lot of companies were doing that previously. Our company, as I mentioned, had not been, but I'm hoping that's something that we'll be able to adapt now that our leadership really sees that it can work. Technology, you know, everybody mentioned technology that they're using. Did you guys use some resources that work for communicating more efficiently moving forward? We've all had to learn new technology. So do they have a place in your business in the future? Will they help you be more competitive? This is the future, right? So we get to define it now. And then I would recommend listening to your team members. gather input from those who worked through the crisis and helped you guys respond. What areas do they think were wins? What areas do they think were fails? What ideas do they have? What can be learned? And then just a quote or reminder from John Maxwell, he teaches us that reflective thinking is needed to turn experience into insight. So experience itself will not be a learning opportunity, but if you reflect on that experience, you should be able to have insight to move forward. And Stan mentioned even in the 90s, people were talking about how do we respond to pandemic. I remember having a big gear up about the bird flu and how we were going to handle all these things and you know, the swine flu and et cetera. This became the big one out of those three, but how do we turn this experience into insights so that we can be more prepared in the future? So I would just mention some of the resources we began utilizing. I mentioned technology. So we expanded Zoom communications. We had been doing, because we have remote sites, we had been doing some video interviewing previously, but we expanded that across the board, and we'll keep that. We were able to add things like a video to our interview that helps that people better understand what they're getting into, what kind of a job they're getting into, and so that we weren't hiring people who got to the site and said, whoa, I don't know. So that is really a money and time and emotion saver for our teams. So we're going to keep doing that. If you do look at Zoom, if you haven't done it yet, I would highly recommend the professional version. There is a free version. It is extremely limiting. The professional version is super cheap, like $150 a year. And then you can go up from there for more, but at the minimum, start there. We also started utilizing, we had never used Microsoft Teams. And I was a little bit skeptical, but it was a great resource. It was a great resource to make everyone feel connected. It's quick, snappy video, audio. You can make phone calls through it out of sight, but you can easily, your whole phone book is, as long as you're using the Microsoft suite, everything is just synced together and you can just call anyone super easy. We still use some conference calling. We of course use VPN, which, you know, if you don't know about, you probably want to learn about. A lot of shared drives. And then don't forget about social media. It can be a really valuable tool for communication and appreciation, and not only to your teams and clients, but outwardly letting people, you know, you are still working, maybe have different times, maybe have different response times. We did an entire video that literally just said, we thank you for coming to work every day. And it showed pictures and pieces of, you know, the America heartland and agriculture and our employees, and said, we are continuing to work. So it took the message out there that, hey, Carthage System is still open, still running, and thank you to all of our employees. We didn't turn it into a purely recruiting opportunity, but it served those purposes as well as appreciation. And then if you do anything international, we have to stay up to date with the electronic submission to USCIS, to the Department of Labor, to the Department of State. Keeping current with international work authorization updates, consulate closures, border closures, documents accepted or no longer accepted. And that's something that if you don't have an in-house expert on that, I would probably work with a legal team, or there are several other teams that can work on that, or I would love to help you with that as well. But that's super, it's vital if you want to stay in compliance. And then my last note is just say the difference I want you guys to all think about. I've really used the word remote, purposely different than virtual, because our team, and I'm sure your teams, did nothing virtually. They were not working virtually. They were working extremely hard to support our business, to support practices, to navigate the emerging political and legal landscape, connect with the production workers. So our teams, it's very important for me to recognize that they were working remotely. They weren't virtually working, right? Which is always the fear of leadership when they haven't done any remote work or any video work, that they think, oh my gosh, what will that person be doing if we let them work from their home? But they will be working remotely. So if you hired the right people and put out the right expectations. So I think we're all ready. Would be open to questions. I don't know if Stan or Cindy, you have any other comments to kind of wrap things up, or if you just want to go right into questions.
I'll have some things to wrap up maybe after questions, just some websites, information. The only thing I guess I would say is I agree that once the organization or the company has spent the money on getting the cameras, getting the microphones, getting the software, setting up the laptops. Of course, that wasn't always easy purchases because things were very limited. I really hope that everybody does maintain some level of that going forward, because you've invested in it. It is there for an essential need, and I think it will be that going forward. So yeah, if anyone has any questions for any or all of us, we'll be willing to answer those at this time. You can do it by, I guess, by chat, or if you want to unmute and do it that way as well. I think our host may have left, but I see that Brenda's on here. Maybe she's setting in.
Yeah, so hi, I'm Brenda Hofler with the Chamber of Commerce, and Samantha got kicked off somehow, so
Okay.
I'm the co-host.
Well, welcome to the co-host. Anybody have any questions?
Thoughts, ideas, considerations, anything you'd like to add? Maybe you had something amazing.
Anything to share?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm going to share some websites and just some upcoming meetings that our organization is going to be holding. First of all, if you would like any COVID or KDHE guidelines, we have a coronavirus tab on our Riley County top of the main page. And so it's www.rileycountyks.gov. And we've got the tab right at the top. It will provide you links with KDHE. It also has CDC connections, any guidance that you have questions on. Also has information from our local health officer and any guidance with that. Our Herman Human Resource Management Network is www.hrmmn-shrm.org. And we are going to be holding our next meeting. It will be on June 10th. It is going to be from 4 to 5, and it's with Tim Collins. He is doing his second part of a series called Trust versus Suspicion. And I think that will be a very good session. If you are not a current Herman member, the cost is $10. So I think you would get 1 hour's worth of very good information. Another thing that our organization is starting, and this is no cost. This is a networking opportunity. We wanted to do these in person, and then COVID started. So we've been trying to do these as a remote, not virtual, but maybe remote meeting concept to discuss any issues that HR or any of the leaders would like to share. And so that is on June 17th. I'm hoping that we will start at our 517, which is what it's called, Herman 517. So again, discussions regarding COVID, FMLA, the expansion of the FMLA Act, unemployment. You know, a lot of us as employers have had to deal with possibly any people being laid off or furloughed and how that affects them with any unemployment and any FMLA usage, which we have done a lot of time with and are continuing with that because the FFCRA Act does go through December 31st. And so that does extend your FMLA benefits for childcare, but once those 12 weeks is exhausted, that coverage is gone. So those may be items that you want to discuss some more with some of our HR people that are dealing with those on a weekly or daily basis. So again, encouraged to go to our website. I know I'm putting in a plug for us for this. But I do think we have a lot of people that are able to provide a lot of resources for businesses, and that's what we're here for. So I highly am very thankful that the Chamber reached out to me to invite our group to present this, and very thankful for Liz and Stan in joining me today to provide this for everyone. So, and then we have a couple more minutes if that's prompted any questions.
And remember, you can, Cindy mentioned it, but you can chat. You can type in a chat, or you can just unmute yourself and ask away.
Oh, we must be good.
I don't know. I hope that's what that means.
I
Or they're too overwhelmed. Yeah. There's
found
a
it
lot
very
of
informative.
stuff.
Yeah. It was awesome. I found it very informative. So thank you very much.
Great. Great. Well, thank you. And again, thanks everyone for attending today and taking an hour of your time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, presenters, very much.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great afternoon.
Bye-bye.